And good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this week's edition of Up in the Air. I'm Ryan Breton.
And I'm Dakota Smith. We have a wide variety of topics on the show tonight, including gasoline prices and how weather affects them, the devastating typhoon in the Philippines, and we'll take a look at the 8 to 14-day outlook, and that'll take us right into the week of Thanksgiving.
That's incredible to believe that, Dakota. We are already into the second half of November. With that in mind, there is a lot of news and information coming out of the weather enterprise and climate world this week, and it's time now for Update in the Air. Typhoon Haiyan devastated and decimated the central Philippines last week. The death toll from the super typhoon may be higher than that of the deadliest hurricanes in the United States. The Great Galveston Hurricane in 1990, the Lake Okeechobee Hurricane of 1928, and Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The Great Galveston storm killed 8,000 people. Early estimates of the death toll were nearly 10,000 in the Philippines. However, on Tuesday, the president of the Philippines stated that he believed the death toll is in between 2,000 and 3,000, with many more thousands injured. Reports that Haiyan was the strongest cyclone on record may be premature, however. Dr. Jeff Masters, a meteorologist for the Weather Underground, posted that the estimate of 195-mile-per-hour peak winds at the time of Haiyan's landfall was based on satellite measurements. Hurricane Hunter aircraft was not sent into the storm. Dr. Masters says that while wind estimates by satellite may have been valid over water, land friction typically knocks 15% off peak storm winds.
A new weather satellite produced in partnership between NASA and Japan's space agency will be launched into space in order to improve weather forecasts and climate models. The Global Precipitation Measurement, or GPM, will be a much more powerful and sophisticated replacement for a satellite that has been in orbit for 16 years. The GPM will be able to detect rain and snow from the equator to the Arctic and Antarctic circles. This ability will give scientists a better understanding of freshwater deposition in the high latitudes. Additionally, due to the wealth of data the GPM will collect, everyday forecasts are expected to improve. Scientists working on the project explain that the data collected by the satellite has the potential to improve the 5-day forecast to be as good as the current 3-day forecast. The satellite has been in construction for 7 years and has faced a variety of setbacks. Finally, this February, the massive satellite will make its trip to Japan and then eventually into Earth's orbit.
The state of California is in the midst of a drought that is now well into its second year, and water agencies believe that there are ways to help mitigate its effects. The latest drought monitor indicates that nearly all of the state is in a drought, and over 3/4 of the state is in a severe drought. One solution is to attempt to increase the amount of precipitation that would otherwise fall, and cloud seeding is a process which makes this possible. It involves spraying fine particles of silver iodide into a cloud system. Under the right conditions, the silver iodide causes water droplets in the clouds to form ice crystals that grow larger and turn into snowflakes. According to the San Francisco Examiner, more than a dozen California watersheds are already using cloud seeding. People are beginning to believe that this process is cost-effective, environmentally safe, and a way to potentially mitigate a severe drought.
Australia is currently on track for its warmest calendar year ever. October was over a degree Celsius above average, and more than 100 heat-related records have been broken in the past year. Records include the warmest summer and the warmest January and September on record. The broken records are of a concern to the Australian government, as efforts to combat climate change as an issue have found a bumpy road in the past. Most concerning was the public vote to abolish the Australian Climate Council in September. The council has since been rebooted through public donations. A representative on the Climate Council, Professor Will Steffen, has concerns for Australians' views and policies concerning climate change. Steffen said, quote, "The statements that have come out of the government haven't been consistent. We need clarity like in Europe and China that the science is real and it's an issue." The Council does not deal with the Australian policy, however, they do hope the science they provide will help to improve the country's climate policies.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, more commonly known as NOAA, released a new data imagery tool this week that is available for public use. NOAA View is available online and offers easy access to 60 NOAA databases that go back to 1880, as well as future climate model simulations, according to the website Climate Central. The user can choose to view data for the oceans, land, or the atmosphere. The goal, according to Dan Pizzuti, the manager of NOAA's Environmental Visualization Program, is to simplify data that is commonly used by news organizations, museums, and those interested in the science. The number crunching is done behind the scenes, and an interactive map filled with data can appear at just the click of your mouse. That's Update in the Air for this week. We'll be back right after this with more here on Up in the Air.
Welcome back to Up in the Air. It's now time for our risk report from the Weather Risk Management Club.
That's right, Dakota. We now are joined by Paul Svensson and Jeff Schmidt to discuss how weather impacts our nation's gasoline prices. To get us started, guys, tell us a little bit about gas prices in general.
Thanks, guys. There are numerous factors that play a role in the overall price of gasoline. In terms of percentage-based breakdown, over 2/3 of the price of gasoline can be attributed solely to crude oil. Refining, distribution, and marketing cover about 20%, while federal, state, and local taxes cover the remaining 10%. So when we dissect the price of gasoline, we have to analyze these factors. Right, Jeff?
Absolutely, Paul. When we look across the country, we can see how these certain factors you mentioned play a role geographically. The image you see right now corresponds to gas prices per gallon in each county nationwide. You may be asking yourself why certain areas of the country experience higher or lower gas prices. Being that the Gulf of Mexico is a major source of crude oil, the gasoline prices around that area are generally cheaper. This refers to the green areas on the map, where gas is normally significantly cheaper than the rest of the United States. What about the other areas of the country, Paul?
Well, both the Northeast and the western areas of the United States do not get all of their crude oil from the Gulf of Mexico. The Northeast is forced to import from overseas, while the West Coast is cut off from Gulf Coast supply due to the Rocky Mountains. This makes the West Coast susceptible to shortages and spikes in price. This is why both regions normally have much higher gas prices.
What role does weather have in the fluctuation of gas prices?
First off, gas prices tend to follow a seasonal pattern. Typically in the summer months, we find higher demand in gas, causing the price of gasoline to rise. This can be attributed to more motorists on the road due to vacation and general travel. In the winter months, the price of gasoline tends to fall for the opposite reason. Looking at the trend over the past year, one can observe the seasonal variation. What about other factors, Paul?
Well, Jeff, in addition to the seasonal variation, natural disasters cause fluctuations in gas prices. Hurricanes in and around the Gulf of Mexico tend to have a large impact on U.S. gas prices. Strong winds and storm surge from these storms can delay crude oil drilling operations and refining, thus decreasing supply to regions that depend on this oil for gasoline, ultimately causing an increase in price. Active hurricane seasons in which multiple storms impact the area can cause constant battering of supply, which can have a very strong impact on price.
Now, with that being said, what do you think, Jeff, about gas prices in the near future?
That's a great question, Ryan. Based on weather alone, with an inactive hurricane season coming to an end and the approach of the winter months, gas prices should continue on a downward trend. As we know, weather is not the only factor when we look at gas prices, but as long as the state of the economy does not drastically change, the downward trend should continue.
Thank you very much, Paul and Jeff, for joining us this week.
Thank you guys for having us, and I know I could speak for Jeff when I say we are proud to represent the Penn State Weather Risk Management Club.
Thanks, guys. Up in the Air, we'll be back in a moment with more.
Welcome back to Up in the Air. Many places across Pennsylvania saw their first snowfall this week.
Crazy, Dakota, that's right. Pittsburgh even set a daily snowfall record on Tuesday with over 2 inches of the white stuff. And it's certainly been cold around here for the past couple of days.
Will the cold weather continue over the next week or so? Meredith Fish is standing by at the Climate Wall with this week's Climate Outlook. Meredith, what do we have in store?
Thanks, Ryan and Dakota. Well, we sure have been having some cooler weather recently, evident as by the snow, both this morning and last night, and most of those cooler temperatures are going to stick with most of the East Coast. However, NOAA recently came out with this significant events for the month of October. Now, really interesting things to point out. There was a rare October EF tornado in Wayne, Nebraska on October 4th that injured 14 people. Now, these types of tornadoes aren't usually typical this time of year, but also looking at some of the other events, we see that the Northeast and the Southwest both were experiencing lower levels of precipitation than they normally have, most of them into the drought levels. However, the South, including the Southeast and over here in Texas, have been experiencing more rain than they typically have for this month. Now moving into our climate outlook for November 20th to 26th, we see that most of the eastern seaboard is sitting at below normal temperatures for this time, with effects feeling from State College all the way down into Atlanta. Atlanta recently has been at 30s, mid-30s, and that weather, that cooler weather, is going to stick with them for into the following week in the next few days. However, the West Coast, they're complete opposite. They'll be seeing some above normal temperatures for this time of year, warmer weather all the way from the Great Lakes all the way to the West Coast in San Fran. Looking at our precipitation anomalies, we see that the South, sticking with the trends that happened in October, Miami, Dallas will be having above average values of precipitation, while the Midwest and extending up into the Northeast, they'll be having some drier weather than they're used to seeing. Now, this dry weather is going to stick and stay out into the West Coast, including areas all the way from Phoenix to Portland. And now joining us is Travis Patterson with the Meteorology Minute on winter weather.
Ever notice streets covered in spider-like webs or think Jackson Pollock went crazy with a tub of white paint on the highway? Well, it's not spider webs or paint, it's actually leftover salt from road crews plowing away snow after a recent winter storm. 50 years ago, road crews coated our highways with about 1 million tons of salt. That number has exploded to more than 20 million tons of salt dumped on U.S. highways and sidewalks these days. Though helpful to us drivers, this can pose a big problem for freshwater fish and other wildlife vulnerable to the extra chloride introduced by the salt. We need to be careful where that salt mixture ends up when digging out from beneath a blizzard. Road crews these days are becoming more environmentally conscious and have developed new techniques to distribute salt more evenly and effectively, avoiding bouncing salt off the roadways. They now also mix salt with water before spreading it on roads, cutting back on the overall salt use. The liquid salt mixture prevents snow and ice from sticking to the pavement and is better for the environment. But that's only half the battle. When it's time for you to shovel that nuisance away on your own property, make sure to keep that salty snow mixture away from nearby plants and streams, and you just might have a better fishing season.
Well, another action-packed episode of Up in the Air is coming to a close tonight. We'd like to thank Jeff Schmidt and Paul Svensson for being here with this week's Risk Report.
And next week, we'll have another update from the Weather Risk Management Club, plus an early preview of the weather trends of the first few days of December in the Climate Outlook.
That's something to look forward to for sure. I imagine it'll be quite wintry. Thanks for being here tonight. I'm Ryan Breton.
And I'm Dakota Smith. Join us next time up in the